Hello and welcome to another episode of the Big Money Stylist Podcast. We're actually in the studio today. If you can't see us, we're going to post these clips on social media, so don't worry, you'll get to see us at some point. But I'm actually with two of my trainers, and I wanted to come to the studio because I was like, let's double up on this podcast, have you guys both come in, and we're just going to talk about real life behind the chair. Like, that was my goal when I created this podcast, was like, I feel like artists, we feel so alone. And we're like, nobody's dealing with this, nobody's talking about it, like all these things. And so like, as I've started to share, like I swear half of our community and half of the students inside the academy are all like, oh, I found the podcast or I heard something. And like, So I know it, like people are listening and people are finding value in it. It's not like social media where you can like see how many likes and things like that. But I always get comments that people are like, oh, I really got a lot of value out of today's podcast, or that really resonated with me. So that was like my goal, is like, I always tell any guests who come on, I'm like, you share as much as your little heart desires. Like whatever you think will help like another artist listening to this, to give them permission. And
nothing's off limits.
Well, yeah, and I think in our academy, like we talk about a lot of this stuff that happens inside of, having a business, but we don't talk as much about it on social media. And I think my fear is like, I never want to come off as unprofessional, or that I'm like bitching.
Or like bashing a client or something like that. But there's a lot of behind the scenes talk where it's like, we come together like with our fellow artists or our community, and it's a chance to feel heard. You know what I mean? So yeah, I want to share it on a podcast, but we can still kind of keep it at a professional level. We might make it a little spicy. We might. Yeah. So we have Kiki and Sarah. Sarah is in Utah, and I can't remember the city. Delta. And she has an assistant.
Come on, Danielle.
Sorry, I'm like, you're in Utah, I'm from Utah. I'm like, I was going to say like Nephi or something.
Close.
Isn't like, Delta like right in the center of Utah?
It's 45 minutes west of Nephi.
Okay, I was like, so I just start naming prophets. Yeah. Isn't that like a Utah thing? It's like, Nephi. Kiki is laughing because she's originally, are you from Utah?
I'm from very close to where you are from, Spanish Fork.
Also, I grew up in Orem.
Okay. Yeah. I grew up in Salt Lake. I'm like a big city girl.
There's an American and a Spanish.
Two forks.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no spoons.
Yeah, no spoons, just forks.
Yeah. I grew up in Salt Lake, so we're all kind of like Utah.
Yeah, that's true.
Our little Utah bubble.
Yay.
I know. So, and then Kiki owns a salon in West Hollywood, correct?
Yes, West Hollywood, California, baby.
I always want to say LA, but it's West Hollywood. It's like its own little area.
It's its own city. Actually, it's its own city. Yeah.
How long have you guys both had your spaces for?
I've had my salon for like 2 years. I think it'll be 2 years in April, 2-year anniversary.
Oh,
but I've been doing NBR for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. I started like owning my space because I took over for the lady that I used to work for there. Probably right around the time where I started NBR, so like 4 or 5 years ago.
Nice. So what we're going to talk about today, we're just going to dive all in, because I was like, what should we talk about? And Kiki was like, firing clients.
Yeah, firing clients.
And I was like, okay, let's go there, because like I've been behind the chair for over 20 years, and in any industry, when you're in the service industry, and here we're in the service industry at some level, you're gonna have a crazy client experience. And throughout my career, I mean, I've had some crazy client experiences, and I've had to feel like, okay, how do my processes get a little bit tighter? Right? Even though I'm like, that lady is batshit crazy. I'm like, how do I get my processes a little bit tighter, where I'm eliminating those type of clients before they even sit in my chair? How am I finding those red flags before they even sit in my chair? And I truly, for me, it goes down to the consultation.
Totally. And I think that like just screening them helps. I think that, but then once I started having actual systems and processes and boundaries inside of my business, that's when I had to kind of lay down the hammer a little bit, if you. And I feel like firing is such a negative word.
Yeah.
Like it's like, I fired you.
What's a better word?
And I never say that to a client when I let them go. I'm kind of just like, hey, like we're no longer a good fit. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And like, you don't need an explanation or a reason for it, but sometimes you just aren't. Like, you're not like a good fit for personalities or anything.
So when you let go of a client, see, you're so good at, to me, you come across somebody that keeps her boundaries and is like, it's very black and white. You're like, hey, we have a 3-strike rule. Like, you miss 3 appointments, you're consistently, it's like, hey, I want you to work with somebody else. And a lot of artists, they have such an emotional attachment, then they want to like tell them this running story. They're like, my dog doesn't like you, and then one time my grandma saw you and she thought you smelled weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So how do you have that kind of like, I'm running a business mindset and it's time for you to go?
I don't think I've always been this way. Like, the first time I had to fire a client, I felt sick inside about it. And I remember asking my dad, can you help me write up a text? Like, I'm so nervous. And I think that was before I did NBR, that was before I was a trainer, and that's before I trained students inside of business.
Yeah.
And now I've learned, especially from your manager, Crystal, at DPW, like, okay, and also Carlos, the biggest thing that he says that I love is what you permit, you promote.
Yeah.
So what you permit, you promote. And I think that has resonated a lot with me in my business because I'm like, am I permitting this to happen? And therefore I'm promoting this to happen. And so if a client is going to treat me a certain way, whether she's rude or she doesn't show up like to her appointment or she doesn't let me know she's not coming, like I'm promoting that behavior. And that is just, that's it for me. That is like the black and white, which has helped me set the standard and the boundary.
So like because you were explaining to me, like you fired clients and they're like almost like personally offended. Like, how dare you? Like, I'm willing to pay you. Like, how dare you fire me?
I think the more that a client pays, like the more they feel entitled to getting the service.
Yeah, I get that.
Right? Like, it's like if you were paying a lot for anything, like at a high-end restaurant, like you're at Mastro's and whatever, you're at a high-end steakhouse and you're paying a lot, like you expect a certain type of service.
Right.
And in the service industry, we're trained to think that the customer is always right.
Right.
And I think that's hard when it comes to hairstylists because we're artists, but we're also people. And I think when a client gets to the point where she doesn't treat my people like they're actual people, that's like when Mama Bear comes in and I'm like, no. Like, I worked so hard to get to this point and I'm like working so hard to like give you a lifestyle because I had such a hard life that like, we're not dealing with this today. Like Mama Bear setting in and like, you're not allowed to come back.
I think too, there's this cap on what people think they're willing to pay with hair. And let's say like, for example, you charge like $4,000 for a full install. And they thought like they might have, maybe they're super wealthy or whatever it is, but they're like, I've only paid $3,000 and now you want me to pay $4,000 or $5,000. And so they expect like the world. And they're like, I should be able to privately text you for this. And I should be able to get in when I have a bead slip. And you should be at my because you're pushing the price boundary on what they were already thought was expensive, right? I've done that myself with hotels. However, I'm not like a crazy bitch, but like I've gone to like hotels where I'm like, oh, this is really expensive. And then I've gone to another one that was even more expensive and the experience didn't match. So then I was irritated.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is wrong with me? I'm like, they never promised X, Y, and Z. In my mind, it was a stretch. So I wanted to notice every little detail and be like, where's my fucking chocolate on my pillow?
Yeah. I didn't get a swan
Yeah,
towel.
I didn't get roses on the bed. What's going on? So I was
But that's what you care about.
Yeah, well, I think that I was paying more and I thought that it would just be...
You get more perks.
I thought it'd be like even better and I was like, maybe it wasn't necessarily better, but maybe it was like, or maybe it was and I was just being the crazy person, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like, and then I'm like, I'm like, maybe clients have felt that way with me, right? But then it takes a contrast of like going somewhere else and maybe even like coming back. And I've had clients literally like leave and then they're like come back and they're like, actually
This was great.
This was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Actually, I'm happy.
Sometimes they need to have that moment. I worked in a salon that was really high end and they let the clients dictate and let them run around. And it was like at the drop of a hat, sure, anything you need, come right in, like do this, that. And like, you know, different prices for everybody, which I hate when people do that.
Yeah.
And so
I saw
so
common
that
in our industry.
And it's so common. And I saw that happening like, ooh, I know that this client like
she has
more
money, so I'm going to charge her full price.
Yeah, or this client, like she has a good social media following, but I know she doesn't have as much money, so I'm going to charge her less because like she'll elevate my career. Instead, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to keep it fair and square, black and white. And like, I saw that happen and I didn't want that for my business.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? We're going in a different direction and we're going to make it very clear. And I think that's sometimes when people get emotional when they do get fired because there's nothing to be mad about because it was so black and white. And so then they're feeling emotional and then they just go low with the comments because they love to say things like, their favorite thing to say to me is, you're so unprofessional.
Yeah.
And that, because that really gets at you as a business owner, or they'll threaten you with a bad review.
I haven't been as involved in behind the chair, but from Crystal and other people, they're like, we've had clients, leave with other artists that used to work at my salon. And then we get like these texts out of the blue that's like, they're literally like, you guys are the worst. I'm so glad she moved on from your salon. And I'm like, why did you need to send that?
Yeah,
like,
why did you say that?
just go to her. I'm sorry you experienced her in my salon and you liked it. Why do you need to send that, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is the point of that?
I love the occasional tattletale. Like sometimes people will, talk to somebody I know and be like, oh, like,
this person said this about you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is true. And I think in our industry, it's kind of like you have to be okay with not letting even negative comments, because with the negative comments you have to think of like how many of women are you helping? How many positive experiences are you giving out, right? And that's kind of where I get to is it's just like, in any service industry, you're always going to have a few bat crazy people. And you're like, that's fine. And the more clear you are with your pricing and your boundaries, then you cannot be taken advantage of. Do you know what I mean? It's like, sorry.
Well, and I think the more you make boundaries, I've never personally had to like text and fire anyone, but the more I learn and create
you live in
boundaries.
Utah, everybody's nice.
I was going to say, LA is a different
entirely
beast than Utah.
Different
Yeah.
space. Also, there's like 30 million people in LA,
Yeah.
so there's just such
Yeah.
a large pool of demographic and cultures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Like not everyone is like the same culture.
I've had experiences where like the more I create boundaries, the more angry people get. They're like, well, who do you think you are?
Yeah, yeah.
Or why are you doing that? Or
Like they want an explanation.
Yeah. I was
And sometimes you don't need an explanation. You're just like, if you raise your price, like, why do I need to explain to you? It
I've
just
had
is
to
what it is.
learn that the hard way, where it's like, I don't actually owe you an explanation at all. Like I was talking about in class where I had like, I created a boundary, had a bad experience, and it's like my first client. They were like, I emailed Danielle and told her how horrible you were, and I was like, oh my gosh, Danielle.
Did you know that? It was her first NBR client.
My first like paying client.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and I didn't have boundaries, and so I was like, okay, I was trying to make her happy. I was trying to do these things, and then I let her dictate the way things went.
Right.
And then when I had like tried to make it right, she's like, no, I emailed Danielle. I told her you were trash. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't. I quit. I don't. What am I gonna do? And then I realized like, that was my fault for not having boundaries. So again, hard lesson. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not ever doing that again.
Yeah, I think too, like the tighter your processes are, the quicker you can weed out certain people.
crazies.
Like I used to be like, want to save everybody, especially with extensions. It wasn't even like, it was about the money, but I was like, I want to help you. It's such a good transformation.
Yeah.
To the point where
I want you to feel better.
Yeah, like to the point where I'm like, I shouldn't have taken you on as a client. You didn't have enough density. You didn't take care of it. You pulled out your own hair. I didn't do that. Like, but now because you've gone to 6 different stylists, I'm taking the backlash of like, I was your final straw kind of thing. So I've had to like really even like tighten up my processes even down to like the consultations. Like if I have a client that I take a deposit and I book her, but she's texting nonstop, asking questions and being like, I'm like, it's not a fit. Sorry.
You're like, actually, you know
Here's
what?
a refund on your deposit. And then they'll be like, no. I mean, I'm like, you have texted me 7 times in the last 3 days at 2 8. No. But like, it's just like, there's so many red flags that I'm like, maybe you had some bad experiences, but now it's not worth it for me. You know what I mean?
It's always like, can I get in this week?
Yeah.
Like I feel like DM'd, then text, can I get in this week? I know you probably don't have any availability. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, I actually don't.
Yeah.
But like, even if I did,
Right.
because we've all been there, right? We've all been there in those moments where we're like, you know what, I actually do need the money.
Yeah.
And I will do anything to get the money because that's like what I need right now.
Yeah.
But you feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
When you first start out, you're like, oh, I need the money, or I want to help you, or like you try to do all these things, and then you learn the hard way that just isn't
For me,
gonna
when
work for
I
you.
felt like I was like, had a crappy experience or a bad client or bad review or whatever it is, I was like, okay, and like we get scared of these gaps on our books, or we need money or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I am like, I'm gonna go out and market my little ass off because I want to choose out of these 10 clients.
I want a choice.
I want a choice. Like I got 10 leads this week, and that doesn't mean I'm gonna take all 10 leads. I'm like, I will do the consultation, and I'm like, if it's a no, like I know my power in marketing. I'm like, I'm gonna go out and ask for the next person. So I think that's where we get like scared as artists, is we, like you said, if we need the money, if there's a gap on our books, we're like, she seems a little crazy, but she's willing to pay me, so that's fine.
Well, especially when you first start out kind of with the academy. And I mean, for me and a lot of people, like spent all the money they had to learn. And then they get to a point where they're like, oh my gosh, my first paying client, I'll do anything to take her.
Yeah.
So that's hard too. So it's nice to kind of know those boundaries, like as you're learning from and hearing other people's experiences, because you're like, oh, okay, I don't want to do that.
And it's funny, like inside the academy, like that's like kind of what we teach. It's like your consultation, noticing those red flags, making sure you take a deposit, making sure they sign that contract when they come in.
These are all like little check boxes of red flags.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like a test.
It really is.
Pop quiz.
But it's even, it's funny too, because even like how it's like in our industry, how you said like, oh, she's got money, so I'm going to charge her what I say my prices are. Oh, well, she doesn't have a lot of money, so I'm going to give her a little bit of discount. She's a social media influencer, so I'm going to give her a little discount. And that's where clients, they feel like they can take advantage of us because we're taking advantage of them by doing that.
Of course
we
they were.
look, we look unprofessional in our industry, and we did that to ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? And
So you have to backpedal.
yes, and so I'm like, that's so stupid. I've done it. I did it in the beginning of my career. I was like, and then I had like clients that were friends talking, and I was like, bitch, I gave you a deal. Why are you ratting me out? Like, I was like, what's going on? And then I was like,
Kinda dug your own hole.
I was like, I don't respect myself. I was like, that's stupid. I'm like, if her friend can't come to me because she can't afford it, then she doesn't need to come to me. You know what I mean? And
I think that's like the hardest part with artists is that backpedal that they feel like they have to do, and they'd rather just suffer than backpedal.
Right.
I didn't have any clients to fire or anything like that when I started NBR. I just had to start from ground zero, and so I learned these good habits from all the artists around me, being like, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't take those clients. Like, you promise, like, it's not going to work. And even I did. I still did.
Yeah,
occasionally.
for sure.
You know, I
Like,
took that client here or there, the one who called in, and I installed her that same day. Like, I did that
yeah.
so many times in my old salon. But those clients never stuck because they
No.
never went through those series of guesses
Yes.
to get into my chair, and I never created that value. And so they didn't value me.
Well, it's funny. So, like, I have a couple girls that do my nails, but I know I can get into them right away. So I have like 3 girls that I bounce around on. So then I have a brow girl. My brow girl, it takes 8 months to get into her. I respect her processes. I fill out the applications. I do all the things. I do the deposit. But then I casually will DM her and be like, let me know if you have a cancellation. But because I respect her processes, she's like, you want to come in next week? I'm like, thanks, girl.
You're like, oh, thank goodness.
But I'm like, I won't go to anyone else. I'm like, she's the best at what she does, right? And so it's kind of like people that like are looking for that, they'll wait, right? People that know they can get into at a drop out of a hat, they're always going to be your clients that are like texting you like, hey, I have this thing coming tomorrow. They're always going to try to take advantage of you because that's what you let them do. Or like I used to work Saturdays but only for fly-ins. And then and then my regular paying clients are like, wait, I saw you were doing stories.
Wait, you said you didn't work Saturdays.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I am, just not for you. You're not that important. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. So then I stopped taking clients on Saturdays for fly-ins. I was like, I can't do that. So it's like,
It never services you
no.
in the long run.
I think
it never
it
does.
does, but because you're like, well, I am still working Saturdays and I'm still getting money from fly-ins.
It's because all of a sudden you're like, you're willing to fly to me? And you forget you're the prize.
Yep.
And whether they're driving 10 minutes, walking 3 minutes, or flying in, everyone has to go through the same processes.
Yeah.
I think that's why I've never done a celebrity hair. Do you know that?
Yeah.
I don't
Neither have
care.
I, and I've been in West Hollywood for years.
Yeah, I was like, I don't care. Like unless I like knew somebody and there was some kind of connection.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm like, no, I'm not going to go hunt down celebrity hair. That's not what that's not what I desire to do, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I won't do it. Like everyone has to go through the same process, and you'll find people that will do it.
Maybe there's a reason why. Like it's like when you work for people like that, it's not bad, but you can't really have as many boundaries because you're working on their time.
For sure.
And you work on your time.
For sure.
Right? Like you are the one who dictates what you're doing and your schedule, and like you're basically designing your life.
Right.
And you can't do that when you work for someone like that.
I was gonna say
that
too,
doesn't fit for you.
I was gonna say too, that would be like my personal assistant. Like they work when I need them, right?
Yeah.
Like I need somebody who's like always gonna be there. So if you're a celebrity person and hair's a big deal, you need somebody who's almost like your personal assistant. They're always with you all the time. So for me, I'm like, I can't do that. I can't travel. I have kids. I can't do that. And that's probably why I've never really even desired, like my goal was never like, I gotta work on J-Lo's hair. I gotta work on that. Not that I can, like whoever does her hair, I'm like, that's amazing. I don't
think
care.
it's
It
like a
wasn't my
childhood
desire.
dream that as like young hairdressers we always think about because we see the magazines that we cut out when we were like learning how to do hair and like the inspo, and like we watched them on TV and it's like so great, but you know, then you get to this moment where you're like, I actually have more than I could have had as a celebrity hairstylist, and like those are the OGs, right? Like we look at all of our artists in the academy and like they're literally bringing in some of them millions of dollars.
Yeah,
and it's
nuts.
like a celebrity hairstylist would never be able to bring in that
can't
money,
bring that
but
in.
it's because they set those boundaries and they designed their life to be that way.
Right.
They have the tools of like what they want and how they can get it. And it's like, I mean, we say this in class all the time, but it's not rocket science, it's a formula.
It's a formula.
And follow the formula.
Follow your formula.
Yeah.
What's if somebody was looking to fire clients, like a new student, what would you give advice, Kiki?
I think you got to check your ego. Like we were talking about this in our beginner, it's like a phase 1 class, so it's like their first phase into the academy. So a lot of these people have never even done an NBR client, but we were having this conversation with them because they were like, oh my gosh, Kiki, like you hire all these clients. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys aren't there yet.
Yeah.
Like check your ego and use your mentors. So like, I use my mentors. I use people in my life that are in the business, but maybe a little bit more advanced than me. And I ask them like, what do you think about this situation? Like, how do you think I should approach this? And like, if you feel like your boundaries are being stepped on, that's probably a sign. And if you feel like you're being disrespected, that's probably a sign, right? Because you can get gaslit into thinking like you are the bad person.
You're the problem,
right? So utilize those people around you and then use your gut.
It's so funny when you say like you are the bad guy, because I resonate with that so much. You're like, oh, I feel bad. What did I do wrong? But also, now it's not what did I do wrong? It's like, what role did I play in that relationship where I could do something different?
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I ask myself. And sometimes I'm like, I showed up like how I told everything I could do, right? And then there's sometimes I'm like,
you're like,
no, I saw some red flags, and I can spot that. So it's not that I feel bad or like I'm the bad guy, but I ask myself, what can I learn in this situation so that I recognize this sooner, and that I'm not putting myself up in a situation where a client is now like sends me this super bad, shitty review. I'm like, well, you know what I mean?
And I did so much of that investing in other people and mentors, like in the beginning of my NBR career, on like learning how to set boundaries. Like, am I the asshole in this situation? And then I would be called out. But I always have made sure to keep people in my circle that I know will be honest with me.
Yeah.
They're my friend, but I know that they're going to be honest with me, and I trust them for that. You have your friends, and then you got your people.
Honest friends.
Yeah, you have your honest friends. They're like, Kiki, you're being an asshole.
Yeah.
You need to like.
But those are the
go
ones you feel like
back,
you can tell.
make it right, and there's certain clients that like they may complain and they may be picky, but like they make you better because they they nitpick things that can and should be adjusted.
Yeah.
And then there's people that just
Hard clients too, though. Like I don't know if you guys feel like this. There's some clients that are just kind of nervous. Maybe they've had bad experiences, and I'm like, I'm so sorry that you had like.
they're like jaded.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm so sorry you had such a shitty experience. So sometimes I have to be like, don't let their nerves affect me. And I just am like, I need to stand in my power, in the sense of like, even though they're nervous, I am confident in the outcome that I can deliver them. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken him on as client, because what happens is if that client's nervous and they feel jaded, they will dictate what you do on their hair.
Exactly.
And you'll be like, I thought you wanted really blonde hot roots and this and that, and you knew better, right?
Yeah, you
But
totally
you're
knew.
listening to the client because they're so nervous and they're so jaded. So anytime
And you're like, you got me.
yeah, right? And you're like, you got in my psyche. How did you
Yeah.
do that? So
Yeah.
I'm always like, take a deep breath. And then I'm like, don't let her nerves like mess up what you can do for her, right? And if you kind of go in and stand in your power and do a phenomenal job, I've had even clients who had shitty experiences and were kind of jaded. I build back up that trust with them, and then they're like,
Oh, they're a lifer.
then they're like, you can do whatever you want to my hair.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
then they just come in and they set their bag down and they're like, do whatever,
do whatever.
I trust you.
You don't have to say anything. You're like, you're too warm here, you're too cool here, and they're like, whatever. And you're like, you need 6 new pieces of hair, and they're like, that's
"Don't
fine.
care."
Yeah.
So I think sometimes in our industry, we think like she's crazy, and it's like, well, maybe, but like be a little patient and stand in your power and deliver the art that you know you can. And in the end, like if you're like feel really proud about the work you did, and she still seems crazy, then you're like, well, we
she's
tried.
It may not be a good fit, but
might
that
be a
doesn't
good
mean
fit.
she may not be a good fit for Jennifer down the road.
Yeah.
I also tell people too, I'm like, remember that these clients are not paying $100 or a couple $100. They're paying in the thousands, and they deserve a little bit more of your time and attention.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like they deserve a little bit more of
the
like,
benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Do you know what we just got for our clients in the salon? We got them heated like massagers. So when they're sitting in the chair, they get a massage like experience.
Hey, that's
Isn't that
I'm gonna
nice?
write
it's like,
that
yeah, I was like, oh.
like heated blankets.
We haven't cracked them out of the box yet, but like it's just like to elevate the experience. 'Cause
I
you're
like
you
that.
know what? You deserve that because you pay more.
Where do you get those?
Yeah.
On
Can I
Amazon.
send you the link to those?
On Amazon, I'll send you the link. Yeah, well, let me give you my review first. Let
Okay, yeah,
me
cool.
use them. I bought 2 pairs so we can rotate them around the salon.
See, and I feel like I have no doubt that you guys offer, like both of you offer like a phenomenal experience, and that sometimes it just comes down to like, creating those boundaries, creating those systems, creating those processes, and ultimately sticking to them.
I do feel like at the end of the day, though, every situation that's ever gone south, I can always look back and be like,
And
I
see,
knew it.
I-
knew
yeah,
that
I
because
know.
it registers in my mind that like I picked up on the red flag and chose to ignore
Totally.
it.
with every single client I
Yeah.
fired, I'm like, you know what? I gave them like almost like a time limit. Like they're not going to last long, but when it happens, and it's like, why did I even let myself get there?
And you're like, I knew it. I knew the exact moment there was a red flag, and I let it slide.
I would say too, if like you're a new artist and you're listening to this, if you have somebody who you're like is rude to you or disrespectful or whatever it is, like ask what you can learn in that situation, but don't let that discourage you from doing what you love. Don't let that dictate like, oh, I'm just a hairstylist, and don't shrink down, right? Like continue to show up as the best artist, continue to show up the best in your craft and your experience and everything else. And you'll become the best. You'll be able to charge the prices you want, work on the clients you want, work the days that you want, and create abundance behind the chairs. So I love having you guys on and just like share a little bit behind the scenes. I didn't want it to sound like we were talking negative on clients, but almost give like an inside scope of like behind the scenes of real shit that artists talk about, right? And my goal inside, like for me as an artist, is I want to elevate our industry.
Yeah.
Like
the
whole thing, and that starts with like no more rent prices and doing whatever you want, and like
we're working Saturdays.
no more working, whatever it is. Like decide what you're charging. Show up, be a professional. Like don't let the title of a hairstylist define who you are and what you can do. So thank you guys so much for being on the show. I feel like it's always a good time. And if you guys are listening to this, you can go to mbr.education to find out more about events, upcoming education. We have an online course, we have an academy convention, but it's sold out. So so we're done there. We can't like if
so
they're
excited.
going to listen to this and they can't come, but we might have a few more events later this year. So stay tuned to that and share this podcast. If you loved it, share it with your friends. It comes out every Tuesday. And that's it. That's a wrap. All right. I never know how to end these. I'm like, all right, we'll see you next week on another episode.
Done.
Cut.